Just when you think a crazy week can't get any crazier, it's like the icing on the multi-layer cake that Alex Anthopoulos has been baking all week. Kenley Jansen is an Atlanta Brave coming in on a 1-year, $16 million deal. Welcome into Battery Power TV. Cory McCartney along with Grant McAuley and Grant. Of all the things we did not expect to see happen this week, I did not think there was any way the Braves would be adding a guy who finished second in the NL in saves last season when they already had the guy that finished third in saves in Will Smith. But here we are, just more craziness for this Atlanta Braves franchise.
Yeah, when we were talking about the Braves bullpen not long ago and the strengths that it already had and the guys who were returning, and then you'd already seen some other moves that have been made to make this group just a little bit better, maybe a lot better. Who knows? We're going to find out. Well, I would say that Kenley Jansen is kind of the coup de grace of all of these moves. We talked about Will Smith finishing the most games of anybody in the National League last year. We talked about what he did in the postseason. All of those things ultimately helped the Braves win the World Series. The team they had to go through, though, their great closer, Kenley Jansen, their all-time saves leader, the Braves plucked him away from the Dodgers on a day in which a longtime Brave was being introduced by the LA Dodgers. There is a lot of, I don't know if it's poetry or symmetry or something going on here, but it's been quite an eventful week for Alex Anthopoulos and the Braves, and it just got a little bit more crazy late on a Friday night.
So Kenley Jansen coming off a year where he had a 2.22 ERA with 38 saves, 52 games finished. Of course, this guy has 350 career saves. I mean, you think about the resume; it's just unbelievable. Only Craig Kimbrell, with 372, has more saves among active players. He's actually well within getting into the top 10 all time. He's 18 saves away from that. 22 behind Kimbrell there, if you want to do the quick math. But again, a 1-year, $16 million deal. Found some interesting. We just listened to Alex Anthopoulos talking about this, and some interesting stuff that came out from this. He said Will Smith was on board from the start, and I thought that was really interesting. Anthopoulos noted that Kenley Jansen going to get the brunt of the save opportunities, but if they feel like rest is an issue, then Jansen's going to get some time off. And they've got Smith available there. You've got two of the guys who finished in the top 3 again in saves last season. I mean, the depth here is just crazy to think about what they're going to be able to potentially pull off with two guys that had those kind of seasons in 21.
Yeah, and I know that saves is not a perfect stat, most certainly, but it is letting you know that this is the guy, or these are the guys that have been trusted to get the all-important final 3 outs. And it is a bit different of a game, a mentality, a mindset for somebody to be as successful doing that job for as long as Kenley Jansen has done it. But man, I came away from this really impressed with what Anthopoulos said the reaction was from Will Smith. There was no hemming and hawing. There was no, oh, okay, that sounds fine. It was, do whatever it takes. I'm ready to win another ring and have another parade. I thought that was terrific. And that's the mindset that you want, because that group together was one of the big driving forces behind the Braves playoff run and their playoff success. And it wasn't about one guy. It wasn't about who was closing, who was getting the final 3 outs. There were plenty of big outs to be had for that night shift crew. And man, if you thought it was just a night shift of a handful of guys that were going to come in, well, now they've got, I don't know what you call this next wave that's come in. Is it the second shift? I mean, is the night shift just that much bigger? Are they going to have to go corporate? Are they going to have to become an LLC? I don't know. There's so many questions here and so many layers of depth, which is another thing. Alex Anthopoulos said that he realized that the Braves needed, perhaps through some trial and error in 2021, coming off a playoff loss and looking at, we got to build our postseason roster a little bit better than it was in 2020 so we get over the hump the next time. He said that he had to kind of be reminded by someone on his staff, we got to get there first. We're going to need depth to do it. And that is a lesson the Braves learned in 2021. And despite all of the things that didn't go right, they won the whole thing. And now they get to take these lessons into 2022 when it comes to roster construction. And it would appear, as I thought, Alex Anthopoulos was taking notes all the while.
So some interesting things that Anthopoulos noted. One, he said, they were worried that, how much, the guys got workloads last season, and, there were, the built-in off days, but they're not going to have those luxuries during the regular season. Right. So obviously this is going to allow them some flexibility there. The other part of this that I thought was interesting is when you think about the fact that they've not gone out and added a starter, right? So now they're going to be in a position where we looked at all those internal options. If they don't go out, and we've seen them in the past year. You think about guys like Anibal Sanchez, where you get that flyer at the end of camp, and maybe you're able to strike something there with a veteran guy. But if they stick with those options that they have in-house with those younger starters, this allows them to kind of maybe have a little bit more flexibility because they have so much depth in that bullpen. And also, he almost approached it. You mentioned night shift, almost as if this is hockey shift. So, you think about, you could have 4 guys that maybe Snitker's going to use one night, but he knows there's another crew of 4 relievers that he's probably going to wait until they uses the next night. So I think this is a really interesting approach to think about how this almost helps the fact that you can go out and get a starter. But then again, you have so much depth that you're going to be in position to use those young guys and know that you have guys for tonight and guys backed up for the next night.
Yeah, and in a week where I think a lot of the focus was on all of the I don't know if I want to call it drama, but all of the things that occurred in and around what was going on at first base, these other things that needed to be accomplished somehow were all accomplished in a very short amount of time. And if you want to look at what the Braves bullpen was just a few short years ago in 2019, when it was going into that postseason run and Luke Jackson was closing for the Braves, they needed to go out and add depth. Anthopoulos said that, look, I don't ever want to be out trying to buy relievers at the trade deadline again. It's expensive. Everyone's trying to do it. You're competing with not only yourself, but you're competing with everybody else who's trying to get a spot in the playoffs. So now, as you look at the Braves bullpen, if he's not worried about having to go out and trade for relievers, it's for good reason, because he's been acquiring them and adding to this group and making it that much better as it goes along. So we went from having, maybe a couple of great relievers. We had a great tag team. Then it became a 6-man tag all of a sudden because you added that third guy. Now it's a Survivor Series match. It's 5-on-5, and we'll see what bullpen's going to be able to match up with what the Atlanta Braves are throwing out there. It is quite a talented group. It's all different kinds of relievers. It's righties and lefties, different pitch mixes. I mean, Kenley Jansen isn't the hardest thrower, but that cutter, he has made a career off of that. Then you start thinking about, well, that's a night you're going to have to face maybe a Tyler Matzak or a Luke Jackson slider. You're going to have to deal with A.J. Minter. You have to deal with Will Smith, who throws a completely different kind of game. And then, oh, by the way, Colin McHugh's here, and Kirby Yates might be knocking on the door at some point this season. And there are other guys, including the side armor, Darren O'Day, who Anthopoulos kind of joked, but I would say has a definite shot at making this Braves bullpen as another guy who adds to it. So it's layer upon layer upon layer of depth. And I think that is what Alex Anthopoulos was looking for this offseason. He just had to take about 3 months off and then do some really crazy supermarket sweep to get the whole thing done.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, think about before the Colin McHugh signing, we were talking about how, lefty heavy, the real high leverage guys were in this bullpen.
Mm-hmm.
And now, as he said, you're building for the postseason. And you think about when you get to the postseason, and yeah, Kenley Jansen's going to be the guy, but you've got a lefty option and a guy who's proven that he can do it. And Will Smith, if you decide matchups play a little bit more in that end. And I just think the way that they're going to be able to approach things now, when you have, not only 2 guys, who have the resumes that now Smith and Jansen have, but also, as you alluded to, the willingness of Smith to just say, I'm all in, go out and get the guys that you need. I think this is just setting itself up to be such a massive weapon for this team. And by the way, the Braves have absolutely cornered the world on elite players coming out of Curacao now. When you think about Ozzie Albies, Kenley Jansen, and then you get those visits from Andrew Jones coming along the way too with the legacy guy there. So they absolutely own it when it comes to Curacao.
Yeah, a pretty impressive bunch. I believe Andrelton Simmons might be involved in
that. Yeah, there you go. Hey, well. Have him dropped by a couple times. Yeah.
He just dropped into the National League again, signing a deal with the Cubs. We'll see him in passing, of course. But yeah, I mean, the Braves have done an outstanding job of constructing this roster in a offseason that was perilous because of the work stoppage. And really, it threatened to kind of, I'm not going to say steal the thunder from the World Series title. Everybody's going to be celebrating that, but it certainly clouded the picture of what you were going to be able to do in the offseason, not just with what was happening at first base and the situation that we were all waiting to see come to some kind of conclusion, which did this week, but then what outfielders are going to come back? What's the team going to look like when it starts to align defensively in that outfield? When's Ronald Acuna Jr. going to be back? We got a timetable for him. We got a timetable for Mike Soroka this week. There's been a lot of Braves news, a lot of good Braves news, some of it bittersweet, some of it emotional. All those things are in play. But if anything, we got baseball back, and man, did we ever get a crazy unforgettable week as the Braves kicked off Grapefruit League play heading into the weekend. We're just a couple of weeks, 2.5 weeks away from opening day. There's a lot of excitement brewing, and for good reason. The Braves have continued to find ways to make themselves better, and this is a club that just won it all, and I think they want to do it again.
I think when we look at this sprint of this week, I mean, across all of baseball, it's going to be awfully hard to argue with the fact that Alex Anthopoulos won the week when you consider all the moves he was able to pull off and the way he was able to help this club, and a lot of moves that nobody saw coming until the Braves decided to send out those press releases that said that they were happening, which, I think we've got to at least dive into this some. Certainly some weirdness happening, across the country today as well, concerning the Braves. Freddie Freeman taking fielding his first questions as a member of the Los Angeles Dodgers. And I think we got a little bit more clarity. There was a long form piece from Buster Olney from ESPN that painted the picture of how things kind of sorted themselves out. And Grant, I think when you look at the particulars of this, it's very easy to say that Freddie Freeman's representatives had a bad read on the market. And certainly when you consider the deferred money that's coming to his deal with the Dodgers, it's almost as if he's playing on the same deal that he would have had with the Braves for an additional year of nothing. There was certainly the way Freddie responded to a question about Alex Anthopoulos, fighting back tears when talking about the trade. We have a little bit more clarity, a little bit more closure, but I don't think it makes anybody feel any better about the situation.
No, probably not. And this is going to be a little bit of a sore subject, a sore spot for Braves fans, a little bit of an open wound probably in some ways. But the salve that was put on it was that you did get Matt Olson. You did get him locked into that long-term deal. We talked about that a lot, but it was surreal seeing Freddie Freeman in Dodger blue, reading Buster Olney's piece that really just gave us the entire backdrop of that and almost narrated in a lot of ways or foretold of what could happen by one Chipper Jones, who has been kind of a mentor for Freddie Freeman for a number of years. Well, Chipper Jones gave away a lot of the thinking that he had on the sidelines as he advised or at least counseled and spoke with his friend Freddie about how this whole thing could play out and the importance of not trying to play too much of a game with the Braves, because eventually somebody was going to have to make a decision and you might find yourself locked out, no pun intended, and not find a way back in and be able to get the deal that you wanted to stay at home. I think Freddie's probably happy he was able to find such a deal with the Dodgers. It does allow him a number of other things, including being closer to his family. But I'm not sure that you're ever going to be able to convince me that his first choice was to bolt Atlanta ahead of the Dodgers and, failing all else, just make that change. I think that this is going to be something we talk about for a long time. I think people are probably exhausted about it right now, but it's not something that's going to fade away anytime soon. But man, what a weird, crazy, and insane week, but one in which you could kind of look all around and say, well, I mean, even though the Braves lost the face of their franchise, they certainly found the best possible scenario for replacing him, and they got that guy locked in for a long time. And they've been making their club better all the while and have a chance to repeat and head to the World Series. And we'll see if Freddie and his Dodgers have anything to say about that.
Yeah, and if Braves fans want to put this whole thing behind them and say, okay, we've got opening day, we're going to move on to the 2022 season. Guess what? Within 10 days of the season start, guess who you're going to be facing? Freddie Freeman and the Los Angeles Dodgers. So the whole thing's going to be rehashed, and you're going to get to see it play out on the field. So it's not going to be at Truist Park, but certainly it's going to be front and center, and it's going to be the biggest story in all of baseball when he has to face off against the Braves for the first time in those, Nansen days of the season, without question.
Yeah, I'm just happy it won't be at a neutral site. Let's go ahead and get this thing on. He can go into his house. He can come back to his old house. We can see how everybody wants to react to it. But, regardless of how you feel about how this week shook out, how you feel about how Freddie's agents or his camp handled this whole thing, how you feel about Freddie Freeman just in general in light of, maybe some of the comments and things that he's had to say this week, including at his Dodger press conference. This is a guy who did give the Braves everything he had. He helped them win a World Series. There's a lot to thank him for, but that doesn't mean that change doesn't come and it isn't time to write a new chapter. And that's what the Braves are doing. That's what Freddie Freeman's doing. And we'll see who has the better ending for their book come October, and probably the Octobers to follow.
I would put a cap on this week and say that it's over. Although, I know Alex Anthopoulos mentioned he's got family in town for the weekend and he wanted to get everything wrapped by Friday. But I'm going to hope that it's all over with, because I don't know how much more stress we can take here. This is, as we mentioned on our last show, this has been absolutely exhausting. But, I know we appreciate everybody who's been coming along the ride with us, all the new viewers we're getting, and hope that, everybody out there enjoys what we're doing. And, tell a friend, make sure they go to the Battery Powers YouTube channel and tell them to subscribe and turn on those notifications. That way, every time we drop a new episode of Battery Power TV, you get those alerts and get to check it out. So we'll see you all in next time. Appreciate you joining us. I'm Cory McCartney. He's Grant McAuley, and we'll see you soon, Braves Country.